Carla Lowe was born December 10, 1961, and was described by her sister as a good and generous person. In 1983, 21-year-old Carla was living in Pompano Beach, Florida. Tragically, on November 13, 1983, she was found deceased in Delray Beach, Florida, near a train station just north of Atlantic Avenue. She had been beaten while waiting for an Amtrak train. Detectives said they searched the area for hours but never found anyone who had seen or heard anything suspicious. Without any further leads, the case would go cold. Then in 2021, Detective Todd Clancy worked on the case with former detectives from the department and utilized new technology. They were then able to find the suspect. Using new fingerprint technology from UK-based Foster and Freeman Company, it allowed a fingerprint to be identified from a piece of evidence left at the scene. However, police would not name the piece of evidence, saying the case was still under investigation. The device used to crack the case is known as Recover, and it is able to develop fingerprints on difficult surfaces and even from items that have been cleaned to prevent identification. 38 years after her life was cut short, 59-year-old Ralph Williams was arrested for her murder in Jacksonville, Florida on November 30, 2021. He had been a person of interest in the killing for quite some time and was actually arrested the day of her murder on grand theft auto and burglary charges, but could not be connected by evidence to her death. Williams' criminal record shows more than 20 arrests across Florida on charges like burglary, resisting an officer with violence, and robbery with a gun or deadly weapon, among others. Police have not determined a motive yet, but say that some of her belongings were taken, and there is no connection between Williams and Carla, and he remains behind bars at the Duval County Jail and will be extradited to Palm Beach County where the murder occurred. Mary McLaughlin was a mother of 11, described as friendly, trusting, and a happy-go-lucky person. On September 26, 1984, the 58-year-old grandmother spent the evening playing dominoes and having drinks in the Hinland Pub, now called the Duck Club, in Glasgow, United Kingdom, in an area known as Glasgow's West End. Her daughter Catherine had to leave the pub early to catch a bus home and didn't know this was the last time she would see her mother alive. Mary was seen leaving the pub at 10:45 p.m. to walk less than a mile home to her flat in Partridge, where she lived alone. On the way, she made a stop at the Armando's Chip Shop on Dumbarton Road, where she bought cigarettes and fritters and appeared in a happy mood. A local taxi driver who knew Mary as Wee May stated that she walked in front of his taxi carrying her shoes in her hands and a man following behind her. This man, believed to be Graham McGill, struck up a conversation with Mary and walked her back to her Crathy Court block on Laurel Street. Mary's daughter reported that sometimes her mother would invite people back to her flat when she had been drinking. Days earlier, McGill had been granted a weekend release from prison. He had been convicted of rape in 1981 and was in his final weeks of a 6-year sentence, which had been cut in half due to good behavior. He allegedly killed Mary that night, and using her keys, which have never been recovered, to lock the door behind him and then returned to prison the next day. 5 days after her death, her son Martin and his then-girlfriend June Brittle showed up to her flat for a visit and was shocked by a horrible smell. He kicked the door in, and June, who has since passed away, entered the flat and discovered the crime scene and came out screaming. Mary's cause of death was strangulation, but with little information beyond this, the case would go cold. Over the years, there were several attempts at developing a profile of the suspect that were unsuccessful. Then, in 2019, experts decided to untie a knot in the ligature and examine the area of the knot that had been protected from contamination all those years. That's when they were able to develop a DNA profile that did not belong to Mary. When the profile was run through the Scottish database, police finally had a suspect, Graham McGill. His DNA profile was also found on a cigarette butt, on Mary's dress, and on a bra that he took from the flat, which was later found in a nearby garden. After McGill's conviction, he was also jailed for life in 1999 for a brutal assault with intent to ravish, but released on parole in 2007. On December 4th, 2019, 59-year-old sex offender McGill was arrested at his home for Mary's murder. During the investigation, his ex-wife said that in 1988 he confessed to killing a woman he met in a pub after going back to her flat and then threatened to kill her if she ever told anyone. Although he got to live free for 35 years, he was ordered to be imprisoned for at least 14 years. One of her daughters, Gina, wrote a book about her mother to keep her memory alive titled Diamonds and Pearls. It is named after a lyric in her late mother's favorite song, Little Things Mean a Lot, by Kitty Collin. Mary's family waited a long time for justice, and hopefully McGill's arrest will provide them some form of resolution. Nancy Jane Daugherty was born May 24, 1948. In 1986, she was a mother of two living in Chisholm, Minnesota, and worked at a local nursing home as an aide. She also volunteered as an emergency medical technician for the Chisholm Ambulance Service. On July 16, 1986, at the age of 38, her boyfriend dropped her off at home just after midnight. She had plans to move to the Twin Cities the next day to attend school to become a paramedic. When her boyfriend could not get in touch with her, he asked law enforcement to do a welfare check at her home. That's when they found her deceased inside. She had been physically and sexually abused and strangled. Evidence indicated that a struggle had taken place inside and outside her home. Police would find male DNA from bodily fluids and under her fingernails. Witnesses said that they had heard a woman screaming in the early morning hours but did not report it. DNA was recovered from the scene but did not match anyone in the criminal DNA database. Over the years, authorities compared over 100 DNA samples from potential suspects, but none resulted in a match. According to old news articles, the case was complicated because Nancy had hosted a party to celebrate her daughter's high school graduation shortly before her death, so there were lots of extra fingerprints and DNA around the house. In 2020, the Chisholm police contracted with Parabon Nanolabs and had hopes of developing new leads using public genealogy databases. This led investigators to Michael Allen Carbo Jr. He was 18 years old at the time of the murder and had lived within a mile of Nancy and went to school with her children. Agents started surveilling Carbo and retrieved trash bags he had thrown into a dumpster outside his Lincoln Square apartment where he lived alone. Taking swabs of paper towels, facial tissues, Q-tips, a beer can, and a Slim Fast bottle, analysts were able to develop a DNA profile that was consistent with that of the suspect from 1986. Investigators then obtained a DNA sample directly from Carbo with his consent, which again confirmed the match. 52-year-old Carbo was then taken into custody and booked into the St. Louis County Jail in Virginia on probable cause of second-degree murder with a $1 million bail. Police say Carbo was never on their radar and hadn't committed any high-level crimes that warranted his DNA being put in the state database. He has lived in Chisholm ever since the murder happened. He has two daughters who live in the region and has maintained steady employment for nearly 3 decades, most recently working full-time as a care provider at a Chisholm facility for people who suffer from mental illness or brain injuries. He was convicted of burglary charges in 1988 and 1990, in addition to being charged in 2002 and 2007 for careless driving and not having insurance. He allegedly abused drugs and alcohol when he was younger, but has not had any problems with substance abuse in nearly 20 years. Carbo's supervisor at work described him as reliable, friendly, and an outgoing person. His former property manager called him polite, respectful, and fun. Longtime family friends said they'd never seen him angry or violent, even when he was drinking or upset. One of his daughters even stated that he was the best father a girl could ask for. His friends said he would help anyone in need, even if he didn't know them. This is the first Minnesota cold case solved through the use of genealogy databases, and Carbo is trying to fight it, along with the removal of his garbage by detectives, as being a violation of his constitutional rights. As of today, he remains in jail awaiting trial. From 1990 to 1999, a serial rapist would terrorize homes in Myers Park, North Carolina. He would break in and sexually assault the females living at the home. During the 90s, the suspect had become dubbed by the media as the Myers Park Rapist. Police say these cases were investigated extensively, and of the 15 cases detectives have connected, 13 of them involved victims under the age of 18. The MO used by the suspect was unique and similar in nature in nearly each case. In the majority of the cases, he would arm himself with a knife, break into the home, and move the victim to a different location. The initial reported sexual assault happened on June 13, 1990, on Maryland Avenue. The last reported assault occurred on Highview Road on January 9, 1999. With the help of the Sexual Assault Initiative Grant and Parabon Laboratories, forensic genetic genealogy testing allowed police to narrow their suspect list to one person, David Edward Doran. However, Doran died on June 24, 2008, at the age of 67. Officials credited the department's Sexual Assault Cold Case Unit, which started in 2006, with developing a suspect through a DNA profile. Police in the 90s had trouble identifying a suspect because he wore a ski mask and gloves, and he would leave very little evidence behind. The suspect's race also couldn't be determined because some victims thought he had a Hispanic accent. The investigation picked up again in 2006 when the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department formed its Sexual Assault Cold Case Unit. Police believed that Doran would be responsible for as many as 50 sexual assaults across the country because he also lived in California, Texas, and Ohio. Police believe Doran was 49 when he committed his first reported sexual assault in Charlotte, North Carolina, and believe he most likely began his assaults at a younger age. Although he didn't live in Myers Park, his distant family said he was a cat burglar who broke into homes during the night in the area. In 2001, he was convicted for possession of burglary tools, but the DNA sampling database didn't exist then. He was charged with assault to inflict serious injury, but was found not guilty in 2004. He was also charged with a felony for offering a bribe in 2005, but that was dismissed. According to the lead detective in the case, Doran's name never came up during investigations in the 90s. Another suspect, Gilbert McNair, was also dubbed the Myers Park Rapist when he was caught in 2009, which led Doran's victims to sadly believe that their attacker had been arrested. McNair was convicted of raping 2 women between 1990 and 1997 on Crescent Avenue and also used similar break-in methods as Doran, but there was a difference in the ages of their victims. McNair targeted women 21 to 28 years old, while Doran attacked mostly minors. Thankfully, now Doran's victims now have some closure. Aundria Michelle Bowman was born Alexis Miranda Badger on June 23, 1974, in New Orleans, Louisiana. Her teenaged mother was promised by Catholic Charities that her baby would be well cared for by a good family. She was placed in foster care at 5 months old with Dennis and Brenda Bowman of Virginia and would be adopted by them at 21 months old. They would eventually relocate to Michigan. When Aundria was 6 years old, Bowman went to prison for 5 years for intent to perform criminal sexual assault when he attempted to lure and assault a woman in a wooded area in western Michigan. The 18-year-old woman was riding her bicycle when Bowman approached on a motorcycle and tried to force her to walk into the woods. She was able to escape when someone in a truck pulled up to help. He was also the suspect in abducting a 6-year-old girl, and his wife supported him through it all. He also had a criminal record even before adopting Aundria, which disallowed him from being able to join the Navy, but was somehow able to adopt a child. In 1988, at age 14, Aundria told her guidance counselor at her high school that she was fearful of going home. The school involved law enforcement who interviewed her, and she told them Bowman often molested her. However, a social worker returned Aundria to her home and confronted her parents about the allegations. And of course, they refused the allegations, claiming that she was just being rebellious after finding out that she was adopted. Shortly after the allegations were made, the family would move to a very rural area in Hamilton, Michigan. On March 11, 1989, Bowman reported Aundria missing, claiming that he came home from work and noticed that she had stolen $100 from the home before running away. His wife, Brenda, later increased the amount that was missing to $150. That was enough for police to issue a warrant for Aundria's arrest for larceny, and the warrant listed Dennis as the victim of his daughter's alleged crime. With no foul play suspected, the police quickly classified her as a runaway and passed her case along to the Youth Services Bureau. For the next several months, her adoptive mother made several calls to police in which she stated she had been told of numerous sightings of Aundria, leading to the belief that she was a runaway, though these sightings could not be substantiated. Sadly, Aundria would be dismissed as a runaway for the next 30 years. In 1993, just like Thomas Dean Gibson from my 5 Cold Cases in Oregon video, she was one of several missing children whose photographs were shown in the music video for the Soul Asylum song Runaway Train. In 1998, 10 years after she went missing, Bowman was arrested for breaking and entering the home of a coworker to steal items, including her lingerie. Before his sentencing in the case, he referenced his missing daughter in a letter to the presiding judge, saying, "I am the father of 2 lovely daughters, one 25 and the other 11, and feel that being a parent is one of the most important and sobering things a person can undertake." In November 2019, Dennis Bowman was arrested for the 1980 murder of Kathleen Dole in Norfolk, Virginia. He was extradited back to Virginia in February 2020 to face charges in Dole's murder, after DNA linked him to her sexual assault and murder 30 years earlier. In May 2020, he was also charged with Aundria's murder. Prior to his arrest in 2019, the Bowmans went to police to complain that Aundria's biological mother was harassing them and accusing him of her murder. Police took the water bottle that he left at the police station and tested it for DNA. That is how he was linked to Kathleen Dole's murder. Once arrested, he also confessed to other crimes. It wasn't until 2019, after he was arrested in the Virginia cold case, that Brenda supposedly learned what really happened to Aundria. During recorded phone conversations from jail, Bowman described to his wife that he killed Aundria. Several days later, it was announced that skeletal remains had been recovered on 136th Avenue in Hamilton, Michigan, concealed by a thin layer of cement. In order to determine if the victim was indeed Aundria, they tracked down her birth mother, Kathy, who in turn provided her DNA, proving the remains indeed belonged to Aundria, or Alexis as her mother had named her. In February 2021, Bowman's wife testified at a preliminary hearing that her husband confessed to her that he murdered Aundria more than 31 years ago. He stated that he came home on March 11, 1989, to find Aundria had packed a bag and was threatening to tell someone he was molesting her again. He said he slapped her and she fell down the stairs, and so he hid her in a barn before he decided to report her missing. Later, he buried her in the backyard. He said he then reburied her after moving from 4249 Lincoln Road in Holland, Michigan to Hamilton, Michigan as soon as they signed papers on the land. Brenda Bowman testified that Aundria told her one morning that her dad had molested her, and Brenda said she told her she was a liar. Bowman is serving 2 life sentences in a Virginia prison after pleading guilty to raping and killing 25-year-old Kathleen Dole in 1980. In November 2021, Bowman decided to plead not guilty to Aundria's murder, and the trial will apparently carry over into 2022. Shockingly, years after Aundria's disappearance, he taught Sunday school to kindergartners at church as a sex offender. It is speculated that he committed many other sexual assaults and even murders. As of today, Aundria thankfully has her name back, and her alleged killer is behind bars.